I started working full-time at 17, thinking I was helping my parents survive. Every paycheck I sent home felt like a badge of honor until I found out they were using my money to buy luxury cars and the latest iPhones. When I finally said, "No more," my mother replied with a message I'll never forget. "Then you're not our daughter anymore." That day, I didn't just lose my family. I lost the illusion that they ever truly loved me. My name is Chloe, and I'm 25 now. But this story starts when I was just 17, at a time when most of my classmates were worrying about prom dates and college applications. I was working 40 hours a week, barely sleeping, and wiring most of my paycheck home. Why? Because I was the good daughter. Because my parents told me, "We just need a little help to get back on our feet." We weren't always poor. When I was a kid, my dad owned a small construction business, and my mom stayed home with me and my younger brother Liam. But around the time I turned 14, things started unraveling. My dad made a few bad investments, some shady partners, some failed deals. Next thing we knew, the business collapsed. The house was under foreclosure. Creditors were calling non-stop. And my mom kept repeating, "We're cursed. Everything's falling apart." At first, I felt bad for them. I watched my parents lose everything they had built over 2 decades. I watched the light disappear from their eyes. I swore to myself that I'd do whatever I could to help them rebuild. So while my friends toured colleges, I skipped applications and got a full-time job at a diner. I picked up extra shifts, worked holidays, birthdays, even New Year's Eve. My plan was to save some money, maybe go to school part-time later on. But every time I got paid, my mom would call crying, "Chloe, we're behind on the gas again. Chloe, the car needs repairs. Your dad can't get to job interviews. Chloe, we haven't bought groceries in a week." And of course, I gave in. I didn't question it at first. I was young, and guilt was a powerful motivator. They painted this narrative where I was the only thing keeping us afloat. "You're not like other kids," my mom would say. "You're strong, you're selfless, you're saving this family." That kind of praise can feel addictive when you're starving for approval. And for a while, I wore it like armor. But over time, the cracks started showing. First, it was little things. I'd come home after a double shift and notice my dad scrolling on a brand new iPad. My mom got her nails done weekly, even though she supposedly couldn't afford medication. Liam, who was 15 then, was still playing video games all day, not working, not studying, just floating. I asked once if he could pitch in, and my mom snapped, "He's just a boy. Don't be cruel." I pushed down my confusion and kept working. At 19, I got certified as a dental assistant. It was the first time I felt like I was moving forward. I started making real money. Still not much, but enough to have a small life. I rented a studio apartment 15 minutes from home, but that didn't stop the calls. If anything, they intensified. "Chloe, rent's late." "Chloe, we can't pay Liam's school fees." "Chloe, I haven't been to the dentist in years. Can't you help your own mother?" It was like I existed solely to solve their problems. When I turned 21, I tried to talk to them about boundaries. I said I can help sometimes, but I also need to save for my future. My mom burst into tears. My dad went silent. Then he said, "We sacrificed everything for you. You think you'd have a roof over your head without us." That night, I wired them 80% of my paycheck. It became routine. I'd send money. They'd spend it. I never asked questions because I didn't want the answers. But things didn't add up. If I was covering their bills, Why did they seem to be living better than I was? I started noticing new clothes in their photos. Expensive perfume on my mom's dresser, upgraded electronics. Once my dad posted a picture with the caption, "Finally got the car we deserve." It was a brand new Lexus. That was the first time I felt rage, not guilt. But still, I told myself, maybe they're just trying to make themselves feel better. Maybe they're treating themselves because they've suffered so much. It wasn't until I stumbled across a credit card bill that everything unraveled. I had come over to drop off groceries, and while my mom was out back watering plants, I noticed a letter on the kitchen table. It was a credit statement not for debt, but for purchases. Thousands of dollars spent on spa treatments, tech gadgets, and yes, that Lexus. That night, I didn't sleep. I just kept reading that statement over and over again, like it would suddenly make sense. But it didn't. I had been lied to for years, and what hurt most wasn't the money, it was the manipulation. The praise, the guilt, the way they made me feel like my worth was tied to how much I could give them. I wasn't their daughter, I was their paycheck. That was the moment something inside me began to shift. After I saw that credit card bill, I didn't confront them right away. I wanted to believe there was a good explanation. Maybe a forgotten inheritance, a lucky lottery ticket, something that would justify what I saw. But deep down, I knew. I just didn't want to admit that the people I sacrificed everything for had been using me. So, I started paying attention. I stopped sending money automatically. I told my mom that my hours got cut at the clinic, which was a lie. I just wanted to see what would happen if I said no. And what happened was silence. For the first time in years, she didn't call. No check-in texts, no, we miss you nothing. It was like I disappeared the moment I stopped paying up. That silence lasted for 3 full weeks. Then out of nowhere, I got a message from Liam. He wasn't one to talk much, so it surprised me. "Mom says you abandoned the family. Said you're selfish now." Selfish. The word hit me like a slap. After everything I'd done, all the birthdays I missed, the relationships I gave up on, the nights I cried myself to sleep because I couldn't afford groceries and rent in the same month. I was selfish. That's when the fog started to lift. I realized my parents hadn't just been using me. They were rewriting the story in their heads, turning me into the villain because I stopped being useful. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I said no clearly out loud. The next time my mom called, she launched straight into her usual script. "We're behind on utilities again, Chloe. Your dad's blood pressure is up, and the doctor won't see him without a payment. You know we're struggling." I took a deep breath and said, "I'm not sending any more money. I need to focus on building my life." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then came the venom. "What kind of daughter are you? After everything we've done for you. You wouldn't have a life if it weren't for us." "You're right," I said, calm but shaking out. "I wouldn't have crippling anxiety and trust issues either." She hung up. I thought maybe we just needed space. Maybe after some time they'd cool off and we could rebuild things on healthier terms. But I underestimated just how far they were willing to go. 2 days later, I got a text from my mom. It was short, just one line. "Then you are no longer our daughter." I stared at it for a long time. Read it over and over like it might change. Like the screen might glitch and show something else. But it didn't. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I felt numb, and then something inside me hardened. I blocked her number. I blocked my dad's. I blocked Liam too, even though he hadn't done anything directly. I needed space from all of them. For the first time in my life, I chose me. It was terrifying. I had no safety net, no family to fall back on. I didn't even know who I was without their approval hanging over me. But I knew one thing: I would never let them manipulate me again. I started working overtime, not to send money home, but to build savings. I took online courses in financial analysis and personal investing. At night, I read business books and followed people on YouTube who taught themselves how to escape the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. I learned about money in a way I never had before, because I finally felt like I deserved to have it. A few months later, I moved across the country. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I changed my number, wiped my social media, and adopted a new last name professionally. I wasn't hiding. I was reclaiming my life. But the fallout wasn't over yet. About 6 months after I disappeared, a friend from back home sent me a screenshot. My parents had posted a long Facebook rant claiming I had run off with a rich man and left them in poverty. They called me ungrateful, accused me of being brainwashed, and painted themselves as helpless victims. That post had over 100 comments. Some people sympathized with them. Others who knew bits of the truth stayed quiet. I didn't respond. I didn't have to, because I was finally building something real, and this time it was mine. I got a job as a junior analyst at a fintech startup. I wasn't making a fortune yet, but for the first time ever, my paycheck was mine. I got to decide what to do with it. No guilt, no strings, just freedom. But I also carried a quiet pain, the grief of realizing that my family never really saw me as a daughter, just a wallet with legs. Still, I kept going. I promised myself I wouldn't live in bitterness. I wouldn't let their betrayal become my identity. But I would remember. And one day, they'd remember too. I remember staring at my phone for hours, rereading my mother's message over and over again. If you're not going to help us, then don't bother calling us again. You're not part of this family anymore. At first, I thought it was a joke. I waited for a follow-up text, something sarcastic, maybe even a laughing emoji. But it never came. Just silence. That night, I cried until I had no tears left. I wasn't mourning just my family. I was mourning the version of myself that had spent years believing I owed them everything. I'd always thought that loyalty meant obedience, that family meant sacrifice. But what kind of family cuts you off the moment you stop being useful? The next morning, I didn't go to work. I called in sick, curled up on my couch, and just stared into nothing, into the heavy, suffocating quiet of my apartment. But eventually, somewhere between the sadness and the shock, something shifted inside me. A hardening, a reckoning. They had used me, and I let them. I was 25 years old, and I had nothing to show for the last 8 years of my life, except a battered savings account and an inbox full of guilt trips. So I made a decision. I would disappear. Not literally, but emotionally, financially, and digitally, I would vanish from their reach. First, I blocked their numbers, all of them. My parents, my aunts, my uncle, who used to text me only when he needed a small loan. Even my younger cousin, who once called me selfish because I wouldn't help pay for her prom dress. Then I changed my email, closed my old social media accounts, started new ones under a different name. I told only two people, my best friend and my therapist, what I was doing. And I moved. I sublet a small studio in a different part of the city under a short-term lease paying cash. I changed my commute, avoided old routines, and started using a new name on every freelance finance gig I could get my hands on. It was like being reborn. At first, it was terrifying. I was scared I'd made the wrong choice, that I was being dramatic, that I'd wake up one day and regret cutting them off. But each day that passed, I felt lighter, and more than that, sharper. With no one siphoning my income, I finally had the freedom to focus on me. I poured every hour into my passion, personal finance for underrepresented women. I built a blog, then a course, then started coaching clients, young women like me who were drowning in guilt, trying to take care of everyone but themselves. It grew faster than I expected. Maybe because it was honest, maybe because it was raw, or maybe because I finally believed in my own voice. By the end of that year, I had cleared all my own debts, built a 6-month emergency fund, and finally felt safe. But of course, peace doesn't last forever. A message slipped through one night. My mother had found my new business account. She wrote, "I see you're doing well. We always knew you were special. Your father's been sick. He misses you." I stared at the screen for a long time. The manipulation was subtle, calculated, guilt wrapped in sentimentality. But I wasn't the same Chloe anymore. I didn't respond. The next week, a mutual cousin messaged me. Then an old neighbor. Then someone I hadn't spoken to since high school. All with the same tone, "Your family misses you. Your parents are struggling. You've changed." Yes, I had changed. I wasn't the girl who sent 80% of her paycheck home anymore. I wasn't the girl who felt indebted just for being born. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let them guilt me back into silence. But it still hurt. Every message chipped away at me, soft little stabs of doubt, of nostalgia, of what if. Then one night, I got a call from a blocked number. I answered out of habit. It was my father. He didn't even say hello. He went straight into a rant about how selfish I was, how they sacrificed everything to raise me, how I owed them for my education, my clothes, my meals, how the least I could do was send money to help with their mortgage. I remember staring out my window while he spoke, heart-pounding, hands shaking, but not from fear, from clarity. I let him finish. Then I said something I had never dared to say before. "You didn't raise me. You exploited me. And I'm done pretending otherwise." And then I hung up. I blocked that number too. In the weeks that followed, my business took off. I got invited to speak at conferences, write guest columns, mentor young women. I felt powerful. Not because I was rich, but because I was finally in control. And then something surreal happened. I was nominated for Forbes 30 Under 30. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was spam. But then I got the email, the verification, the interview request, the photo shoot. When the article came out, I cried, not because I'd made it, but because that girl who used to send home paychecks in a crumpled envelope, she was finally free. The very next day, I got another call. This time, I didn't answer. It went to voicemail. It was my mother. Her voice was soft, tired. She congratulated me, said she always knew I had greatness in me, said she missed me. Then came the kicker. "Your father's in the hospital. We could really use some help." Anything you can give? Please. My hands trembled as I replayed it. I stared at the screen. Then I opened my text app. I typed one sentence. Your daughter used to exist. She doesn't anymore. And I hit send, not out of revenge, not out of anger, but out of truth. Because the Chloe who lived in fear, who sent her dreams home in monthly wire transfers, that girl had died the moment they disowned her. And the woman who stood in her place, she was nobody's puppet anymore. 2 weeks after I sent that final message, something unexpected happened. I received a certified letter. No return address. Just my name. Handwritten in unfamiliar cursive. Curious and a little cautious, I opened it. Inside was a notice my parents were declaring bankruptcy. They had listed me as a potential financial cosigner for several of their failed ventures, none of which I had ever signed off on. Car loans, a small business grant, even a payday loan with my name attached. I froze. My first instinct was panic. Was this legal? Could they really drag me down with them? I called my lawyer, who I had recently hired to help set up my LLC. She took one look at the paperwork and shook her head. They forged your signature. All of this is fraudulent. I felt sick, but not surprised. They hadn't just tried to guilt me into sending more money, they were trying to take it by force. This was no longer just family drama. This was criminal. I filed a fraud report immediately. My lawyer contacted the creditors, submitted handwriting analyses, and provided documentation proving I had no involvement in any of these loans. Within weeks, everything was cleared from my name. But that wasn't the end of it. The investigator working on the fraud case called me privately. We've seen this before. Parents using their kids' information when they have good credit. It's awful, but common. They could be looking at charges if you want to press it. I hesitated. Did I want to? Was it worth it? I thought about how they took 80% of my salary for nearly a decade, how they threatened me, disowned me, tried to sabotage my independence. And now, after everything they had tried to steal from me one last time quietly behind my back, assuming I'd never notice. I gave the green light. The charges went through. Forgery, fraud, identity theft. They were investigated formally, warned, and publicly shamed in their community. The small business they'd tried to start with that stolen money shut down. Their social circle gone quiet. Even my extended family, those who once accused me of being selfish, began to whisper behind their backs. And me, I kept rising. Within months, I was invited to partner with a major financial platform. They wanted me to build an educational series on financial abuse, specifically how parents manipulate and financially trap their children. It was like the universe had drawn a perfect full circle. I accepted. My face, my story, my voice, it all went public. I was scared at first. Exposing my past so openly felt like peeling off old scabs. But I reminded myself this wasn't just my story. It was thousands of people's stories. People stuck in toxic families, drowning in debt that wasn't theirs, afraid to say no because they were told that family is everything. I received hundreds of messages. Girls like me, boys like me, people in their 20s, 30s, even 50s finally breaking free. They thanked me. They cried. Some even said, my story gave them the courage to cut ties they should have cut years ago. It became bigger than revenge. It became purpose. One afternoon, As I was finishing a virtual keynote, I got an email. It was from my old high school. They were naming their new financial literacy program after me. The Chloe Daniels Initiative for Independent Youth. I stared at the screen, stunned. I hadn't stepped foot in that school since I was 17, back when I was working full-time shifts just to send money home and sleep 4 hours a night. And now, they were honoring me. The full circle moment hit me like a wave, but there was one last twist left in this story. A reporter reached out. She was covering a story on generational financial abuse and asked to interview my parents for the other side of the story. They agreed. The piece aired 2 weeks later. My parents sat in their modest living room, looking far older than I remembered. My father's hair was grayer. My mother's eyes were puffy. They didn't deny anything, but they didn't apologize either. We did what we had to do. My father said she wouldn't exist without us, my mother added. She owes us everything. And there it was, the final confirmation I never knew I needed. They hadn't changed, not a bit. Even after everything, they still believed I was just a product they built and deserved to collect from. And I felt peace. I no longer needed their love, or their approval, or even their remorse. I had something better, freedom, and a future they could never touch again. A few months after the interview aired, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, a text came through. It was my mother. Saw you on Forbes. I guess you finally made something of yourself. No congratulations. No apology. Just a hollow acknowledgement. And then the next message. We still have the family house. You could come visit. Bring one of your awards. Show the neighbors. It was surreal. After years of silence, betrayal, and fraud, they wanted to parade me like a trophy. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't spent years trying to survive the damage they'd done. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, but not from anger. From clarity. I knew what to say. I typed one sentence. The daughter you once had doesn't exist anymore. And then I hit send. That was the last time I ever contacted them. Since then, I have moved again. Not to hide, but to start fresh. My life now, it's quiet, peaceful, mine. I mentor other young adults through financial recovery. I speak at universities. I take walks without checking over my shoulder. I laugh without guilt. I rest without shame. I've built a life no one can take credit for but me. Sometimes people ask if I ever feel bad about cutting them off. I tell them the truth. Loving your family is noble. Surviving them is heroic. And I did survive. I rose. Not despite what they did, but because I finally stopped letting it define me. I'm not their daughter anymore. I'm my own creation, and I've never felt more free.